Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background while reading this work. This is Chapter 3, Part 2 of Passerine. Trigger warnings for panic attack. Tommy found Techno in the training pavilion, practicing his lunges with the silver trident Wilbur had gifted him a few years back. Technoblade took one look at the expression on Tommy's face and tossed him a spear that had been leaning against one of the statues. Wordlessly, they took their positions in the middle of the pavilion, sizing each other up for a moment before jumping into action. After 6 years under Techno's tutorage, Tommy could hold his own against knights twice his age and size. He even beaten Wilbur in once, though the older sibling profusely maintained that he went easy on Tommy, but he had never beaten Techno. Tommy was sure even Wilbur, who had been training with Techno for longer, had never won against their tutor. In a truly bleak moment when he was 13, Tommy eventually realized that the man they were fighting against might not even be using his full strength. But that didn't matter right now. It wasn't about winning this time. Tommy rushed Techno with a visceral scream, a sound that came from deep within his chest. Techno deflected him easily, though, but Tommy continued the onslaught, dealing blow after teeth-shattering blow. He kept screaming through it all, screaming nonsensically, screaming at his brother, at his dad, at his kingdom, at the gods themselves. He felt as if his throat might tear itself apart. Tommy managed to push Techno back towards one of the statues, the one that bore marks of Tommy's height over the years. Techno grunted as Tommy shoved the butt of his spear against Techno's chest, and then retaliated by catching his shaft in the prongs of his trident. With a single jerk of his arm, Techno ripped the spear out of Tommy's hands. It clattered to the floor somewhere behind Tommy, but that didn't stop him. He balled up his fist and hit indiscriminately at Techno, his knuckles finding an arm, a rib, a collarbone, and Techno merely stood there, taking all of it. He let Tommy burn his anger away in exhaustion, without a word of protest. When Tommy collapsed to the ground, a heaving, sweaty mess, Techno silently placed his own weapon to the side and lay down beside him. They spent half an hour just like that, staring at the roof, listening to Tommy's harsh breathing slowly wind down. Neither of them spoke, neither of them needed to. Silence was a language in and of itself, and Techno was the most fluent in it. And so he was the one who knew just how to break it. Let me guess, Techno drawled. You and Wilbur had a fight again. Tommy exhaled through his nose. Called me an annoying child, he muttered. He does that every day, Tommy. I know. It was different this time, though. He might actually have meant it. Ah. There was a rustle of fabric as Techno crossed his arms under his head. Well, Wilbur's not having a very fun week, so I take everything he says with a grain of salt. I wouldn't know that, Tommy grumbled. Neither of you tell me anything. You never express a desire to be told. I would appreciate being told regardless. Noted then. Another moment of silence stretched before Tommy whispered, He didn't even run after me. He would have, before. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Techno shift, so he was looking down at him, arm braced against the floor. When Techno spoke again, his voice was patient. Before what? Before he was king? Tommy sighed. He felt like his lungs had come loose in all the chaos. Everything in his chest was all too tight, all too sore. He closed his eyes against the pain, feeling his brother in the darkness, brown curls falling over his eyes as he bent over his guitar, smiling at his own music. Tommy would give anything to hear Wilbur play like that again. No, Tommy began, rethinking his words even as he was saying them. Being king has nothing to do with it. I guess I mean it was different before he started choosing being king over being my big brother. Oh, Tommy. The sadness in Techno's voice made Tommy's eyes snap open. You think he has a choice? Tommy rolled over to finally look Techno in the eyes. Not much had changed with Techno over the years. He still kept his hair long and occasionally let Tommy braid it. His hands remained as scarred as ever, with some fresh ones now and again from adventures he told no one about. He still wore shirts with too many ruffles for Tommy's taste, but he no longer had the emerald earring he used to wear when they were younger. Tommy couldn't remember the last time he'd seen Techno with it. In its place was the sapphire Tommy had given him 2 years ago, mostly as a joke, and he'd only admit he was pleased to see Techno wearing it under the threat of death. Techno's expression was shuddered, in that way of his whenever uncomfortable topics came up. His past, stated secrets, Dad. Something's really happening, Tommy said, watching Techno's face carefully. Something bad. Techno's face remained unchanged, save for the telltale quirk at the corner of his mouth that signaled his anger. Tommy had only seen Techno truly angry a handful of times, and was not eager to add to that list. Things are a bit fragile right now, Techno said, but I'm trying. I really am, and I need you to know that, Tommy. I do, Tommy said resolutely. I trust you. Because while Techno had stayed when Tommy and Wilbur were at their worst, they'd repaid him in kind. A few years into Wilbur's reign, Techno had taken to studying on statesmanship and politics and etiquette as if his very life depended on it. It was the only aspect he was lacking in, he'd said, and he needed to cover for Wilbur when push came to shove on debate floor. And when Tommy and Wilbur couldn't understand his sudden zeal, they still knew that their tutor needed rest as much as any other human being, so they developed their own systems of getting Techno to eat and drink, and oftentimes had to physically pry him away from the library. Techno eventually relented to calming down after he knocked Wilbur to the ground in one of their struggles to get him to bed. And when he sometimes disappeared in the middle of the night, or went off to God's know where for days on end, they'd simply welcome him back when he was ready, no questions asked, partially because the look on Techno's face after his escape ads implied that whoever asked would be thrown over a balcony. If things are so bad, why are you here then? Tommy asked. Shouldn't you be at the king's side, Sir Right-Hand Man? Techno wrinkled his nose in response. Oh, laughter bubbled out of Tommy, unbidden but welcome. I see. He kicked you out too, didn't he? I suggested a solution that would end all of our problems very easily. Wilbur vetoed it, admittedly. Tommy grinned. So you're throwing a tantrum? Techno scoffed. I am not you, Tommy, he paused. But I suppose under the dictionary definition of a tantrum, I am currently in the middle of one. Tommy began to laugh, that sort of laugh that ended in wheezing and hiccups. Techno watched him with a faint smile, and the two of them basked in the simplicity of it, just two boys on the floor of a hot summer day, laughter bouncing off their skin like sunlight. We'll be okay, Techno, Tommy assured him once he settled down. I mean, it's you and Wilbur. You'll figure it out like you always do. Techno stared at Tommy for a moment before quickly looking away. That's enough saccharine garbage for the day, I think. Get up so I can beat you to the ground again. What does saccharine mean? It means you need to brush up on your vocabulary, Tommy. Techno got to his feet and offered Tommy a hand. Tommy grinned as Techno pulled him up. Though his palm was scarred, it was warm. Tommy rolled his shoulders back until he heard the satisfying pop of his bones rightening themselves. He and Techno had sparred until the sun went down, at which point a messenger had arrived to inform Techno that King Wilbur had said uncle and was crying for help. Not in those words, but close enough in interpretation. Go, Tommy had encouraged when Techno had hesitated on the steps leading down from the training pavilion. At least one of us is welcomed back in His Majesty's good graces. He should be looking for a way back into yours, Techno had replied, and he was gone. Tommy had spent the rest of the evening stabbing at the training dummy with his spear until another servant arrived to call him to dinner, which, unsurprisingly, he ate alone in an empty dining room. Afterwards, he'd made up his mind to swallow his pride and found his way back into Wilbur's office. The guard standing post outside was gone, which meant that Techno was still inside. After all, who needed guards when Technoblade was there? As Tommy drew nearer, the voices had begun to filter in through the door, muffled but getting clear as he approached. Quiet today, someone was saying, but that hardly means anything. I think they know something I don't, Techno. Tommy held his breath as he pressed his ear against the door. Did you do the breathing exercises I taught you? Techno soft drawl. Did I? Of course I did. I did everything you said. I always do. Wilbur's fraught murmur. Then why won't you let me do this for you? Do what? Tommy had leaned in close as he dared. Because it won't help, Wilbur had said. It sounded as if this was an argument they'd had a million times before. We don't know why they're gathering at the border yet. You've studied history. You know nothing good ever comes from this sort of maneuver, Wilbur. Meanwhile, the longer we wait, the less prepared we'll be when they... If they do, Wilbur interrupted. We're not entirely unprepared. I've sent the conscription notices. There was a loaded pause. You did? Tommy didn't know if Techno sounded more impressed or indignant. When? This afternoon, after my little brother looked at me in the eyes and I realized how much I have to lose. At that point, Tommy had backed hastily from the door as if it burned him. He turned on his heels and ran, his head spinning and his heart hammering, unsure whether to laugh or to cry. Something bad was really happening, something that made Wilbur think he was going to lose everything. Tommy didn't pay much attention to his history tutors. They were never as amazing as Technoblade was, but he did know that this family had maintained peace in the kingdom for decades, and that talks about borders were never joyful affairs. Now, in the silence of his bedroom, he paced, working out the kinks in his body and trying hard to ignore the gnawing feeling that he was on the brink of something too large to comprehend. But there was one thing he knew for certain. None of this would be happening if their father had stayed. Techno did, even when he'd only known him for a few months. What had stopped him from doing the same? And then there was the guilt of knowing exactly what would have made him stay, what would have been done, secrets, what terrible, heavy things. Tommy was still wearing a path through the rug when the knock came, startling him out of his thoughts. "Yes?" he called, suddenly getting the urge to reach for one of the decorative swords hanging from his wall. "It's me." "Wilbur." Tommy relaxed, and then, jolting back, "Wilbur." Tommy opened the door slowly, unsure of who he was waiting for on the other side, the king or the brother. But standing at the threshold, his shoulders slumped and his smile tired, was just Wilbur. "Hello," Wilbur said. "Can I come in?" Tommy rolled his eyes. "Techno told you to come, didn't he?" The smile slipped from Wilbur's face. "Does it matter?" he asked exhaustedly. "Suppose not." Tommy stood back as he let Wilbur inside. Wilbur crept in like a tourist, looking at every inch of Tommy's room like every little thing was a priceless artifact. When had Tommy last allowed his brother into his bedroom? Most likely around the same time Wilbur moved his things into the king's quarters. "I like this," Wilbur said idly, pointing at the ancient morning star hanging next to the door. "Really ties the room together, I think." "Cut the carp, Wilbur," Tommy snapped, the morning's vehemence returning like bitter waves in the shore. "Just tell me why you're here." Wilbur sighed as he threw himself down on one of the spare settees. "We need to talk, Tommy." "All right." Tommy leaned against the wall and crossed his arms, watching Wilbur suspiciously. "Talk, then." Wilbur crossed his legs and returned Tommy's scrutiny tenfold. His dark eyes seemed to be made for the very purpose of staring people down. "First of all, I would like to apologize for what I said earlier. You are never an annoyance to me, Tommy, but you are a child." "Wilbur." Wilbur held a hand up in silence to silence him. "Let me finish," he said, wielding not the authority of a liege, but of a firstborn sibling. "You are a child. That isn't a bad thing. You're allowed to be what you are, and you are young. But that's also the reason why I thought it was best to keep things from you. In my efforts to protect you, I drove you away, and that's the last thing I want, and you're right. Speaking with Techno did help me come to that conclusion, but we all need Techno's help now and again, don't we?" Tommy scoffed, but he knew he couldn't disagree. Wilbur knew it too. "I don't need to be protected, Wilbur," Tommy said weakly. "Then why do you always look so sad?" Tommy's eyes locked on Wilbur's. "What?" There was a world's worth of pain in Wilbur's expression. "Whenever you think no one's watching, you look so sad, Tommy. But I see you. You joke and laugh and shout all day, but the moment you're alone, you get this look on your face, like you're carrying some heavy weight, and you're trying to find somewhere to set it down. But there's nowhere. I've seen that look before, Tommy, and that's why I'm scared for you, because Father—" "Don't," Tommy croaked. "Don't compare me to him, Wilbur. I am nothing like him." "Prove it, then." Wilbur suddenly stood, making Tommy jerk back against the wall. "Do what he never had the guts to do, and tell me. Tell me what's wrong, Tommy. Tell me what you're carrying, and I'll help you." Tommy's chest felt tight with the pressure of the decade-old secret. His eyes instinctively scanned the room for an exit. Some way out. Some way to never speak of this again. He wanted nothing more than to melt into the wallpaper behind him and never see the light of the day again. Wilbur's expression softened at Tommy's panic, and he slowly sat down on the settee. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I didn't mean to." He pinched the bridges of his nose and let out a long sigh. "I'm so bad at this. Okay. Here. To prove to you that I can handle your secret, I'll tell you mine." Tommy's brows furrowed. "You have a million secrets, Wilbur. Maybe even more than that." "I know, but this is the secret, Tommy." There it was again, that feeling that was standing on the precipice of a dark, unfathomable chasm. "I," said Wilbur, "hear voices." He tapped his temple. "Right here. Voices that aren't mine, or anyone else's. As far as I know, we're still trying to figure it out. We? Tommy breathed. Techno and I. Ah, of course. Tommy leaned slightly forward, confusion and fear wearing in his gut. What do these voices say? Sometimes they're very cryptic, vague, talking about the fate and strings. Sometimes they just taunt me, and sometimes it's worse. Wilbur took a sudden breath. So much worse. Is it right now? And right now? Tommy asked, not sure if he wanted to know the answer. Right now, said Wilbur. Wilbur said gently, they're telling me to kill you. Tommy's breath caught in his throat. He was suddenly very aware of how many weapons, decorative or otherwise, he had on his walls. Wilbur, you can't. I'm not going to do it, Tommy, Wilbur said, sounding hurt that Tommy might ever think the opposite. I would never hurt you, but these voices, they're saying it's inevitable, that it's your destiny to die by my hand, that this is a story that has been told many times over, and we can't change how it ends. And how does it end? Badly, Wilbur whispered. His tone made it clear that whatever it was, Tommy was not prepared to hear it. Well, you don't actually know what the voices are saying are real, right? Maybe it's all nonsense and it won't actually happen. But it already has, Wilbur swallowed, and both he and Tommy steeled themselves for what he was about to say. 2 months ago, the voices told me there was something coming, that an army was gathering at our northern borders. But we don't have any enemies. That's what I thought too. But I sent some spies to investigate, just in case, and they confirmed it. Wilbur steepled his fingers, his eyes as hard and dark as polished iron. Just like the voices said, a war might be coming, Tommy. But what was it that Techno had said? Wilbur's not having a very fun week. Tommy might laugh at how huge of an understatement that was, if he wasn't so busy choking on his own tongue. War. Such a small word for such a big thing. Well, Tommy slid to the floor as his legs gave out. Then, Techno and I are trying to make contact with the foreign army's generals, Wilbur said, and Tommy noticed for the first time how many silver hairs Wilbur had acquired, almost glowing in the moonlight streaming from the windows. We're doing everything we can to stop it from happening, Tommy, but yes, that's it. Those are my biggest secrets. The rest are inconsequential. He took a deep breath, as if to steady himself. I think it's your turn, Tommy. Tommy laughed bitterly. After that reveal, anything I say will just sound stupid. It won't, Wilbur said, resolutely. He leaned back onto the settee, giving Tommy a gentle look. Whenever you're ready, Tommy, I'm right here. Tommy held his legs towards himself and wrapped his arms around his knees, clinging on for dear life. This was too much, too fast. He wanted to yell. He wanted to crack his fist open on the marble statue with Techno's little markings. He wanted to pinch himself and wake up yesterday, when nothing was wrong except for the gnawing pain in his chest that had never gone away. Even 9 years later, he wanted his parents. The world had gone suddenly dark, and in the shadows, Tommy finally let go. You want my secret, Wilbur? He pressed his face against his knees, as if that might hide the shame from the world. I saw him. There it was, the truth, or a confession, or both. That night, I saw him. He heard Wilbur suck in a breath. There was no need to elaborate. Between the two of them, there was only one he, and only ever one night. He kissed my hair, and that's what woke me. I saw him walk away from my bed, towards my window. I saw him open it, and I saw him climb out or jump out. I want to say he flew out like a bird, but I don't remember that part very well. What I do remember is just lying there, fully awake, knowing something was really frickin' wrong. I just laid there. Tommy's eyes began to sting, so he closed them shut before the first of the pathetic tears could fall. Eventually I climbed out of bed, and I went to their room, wanting to believe that I just dreamt it all, and that's when I found Mama. He could still it in his mind's eye. He remembered so little of her, but he could never forget how he crawled up on the bed next to her, trying to wake her. He could never forget his confusion when she refused to, nor the binding pain when he realized why. And most days, Wilbur, that's all I think about, how I was awake and could have stopped him, and I could have made him stay, and you wouldn't have needed to be king so young. I could have spared you for all of this, Wilbur, and now everything's gone so bad, and it's all A sob tore free from his lips, suddenly and unrelenting. I want to help you, but I don't know how. Nobody ever taught me how. Tommy. Wilbur's voice sounded so far away. But the worst thing, Tommy continued, trying to ignore the ever-tightening noose around his neck, is that maybe I should have seen it coming. He used to come by your door in the middle of the night when you used to live across the hall. I kept my door open just a crack after the first time it happened, just to see if he would come again. And he did, so many times. I used to think he would knock eventually, but he never did. Tommy tightened his hold on himself, shaking with grief and maybe with relief too. I think he was saying goodbye long before he left, Wilbur. For a moment, the only response to his words was silence. Tommy was afraid to look up to see if Wilbur had left, angry and betrayed. But instead, Tommy felt warm hands encircle him and pull him towards something safe and solid. Tommy, Wilbur whispered into Tommy's hair, you were 6. And that was it. That was what broke Tommy in the end. He crashed into his brother, wrapping his arms around Wilbur's torso and burying his face into his chest. The tears finally came, a culmination of 9 years of guilt and paranoia, of stumbling through life unsure of where he stood with his brother, of fearing that one day Wilbur might find out what he failed to do and hate him forever. But this wasn't hate, this was the opposite. Shh. Wilbur ran a hand through Tommy's hair. It's all right, Tommy. Let it all out. There was just 2 of them for that moment. There was no voices, no ghosts, no secrets. Just Wilbur and Tommy. Tommy and Wilbur. Eventually, Tommy's sobbing ebbed. His cheeks were wet and cold from his tears, but he could breathe easier than he ever did. He drew back from the circle of Wilbur's arms and found his brother looking at him with a gentleness that he could never deserve in 1,000 years. See, Wilbur said, delicately brushing stray tears from Tommy's cheeks. Tommy's cheeks. Isn't it lighter with someone else to carry it with? Tommy sniffled. You always have to be right, don't you? Well, of course. Otherwise I'd be stripped of my title as Grand Master of Pretentiousness. The council would have a field day. Tommy laughed wetly. What will your voices say after you suffer such a disgrace? Funnily enough, Wilbur said softly, they're very quiet right now. So what happens now? Tommy whispered into the dark. I don't know, Wilbur confessed, but what I do know is that there should be no more secrets between brothers. Agreed? Agreed, Tommy said. No more secrets. Wilbur looked as if he wanted to say something else, but Tommy would never have the chance to find out what, because in that same moment, Techno burst through the door, his expression like hellfire. Wilbur was on his feet in an instant, reaching for a crumpled note Techno was holding out to him. Tommy watched his brother's face drain of all color as his eyes scanned through the message. What? Tommy demanded, his heart ringing in his ears. What does it say? When Wilbur looked back at him, his eyes were bleak and haunted. You wanted to know what conscriptions were for, Tommy? Well, you're about to find out.